But yeah, we're gonna move up to picks 21 through 32, and talk about just kind of the grouping of guys in this area. I mean, we're gonna see, like we said, tons of offensive linemen, tons of tackles, tons of interior offensive linemen, some wide receivers, and just a bunch of guys that are going to come in and help these upper echelon teams just pat down the positions of need.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, and we don't want to spend too much time on it just because one, it's not the sexy thing, and it's just kind of like you're picking the next best guy.
mhm.
Uh, you know, like we said, Miami desperately needs linemen. Dallas, there's a very good chance that either they're going to take a future tackle, interior lineman. Tyler Biadasz is a free agent. Tyron Smith is a free agent.
Mhm.
So good chance that they take one. And Houston Texans need offensive linemen, but defensive tackles,
Interior,
maybe.
yeah.
Eagles, horrible defensive backs last year. They probably need a corner. Like those are kind of the situations, and throughout the whole offseason, we're going to be projecting those positions to those teams the entire time.
Yeah.
I don't see it changing. Maybe there's give or take. We said that Miami might be a good trade out candidate due to lack of assets in our previous video, but that doesn't negate the fact that early on they're probably going to be targeting
Right.
offensive
Well, I
lines.
think also they might address one of these positions
Mm-hmm.
in free agency, and we aren't there yet.
That's true too.
And so if they address that position, we're probably not going to mock them. We'll mock them somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Just depends on, the ebb and flow of the offseason, and getting closer, we'll have a better idea when we release our final mock for just where everybody could be. But yeah, so I think, getting into some relevant topics from this list, and like at the end here, um, Brock Bowers is a top four player to me. And the fact that he's going at 15, it just hurts my soul,
Mm-hmm.
because we
Yeah,
have
it's rough.
seen tight ends go early. It's not out of the possibilities. We have Kyle Pitts going at 4 to Atlanta. We have T.J. Hawkinson in a trade going at 10. So this one kind of is hard for me to swallow, because I think by the end of it, somebody could be a wild card to finding a way to get him and addressing other needs, so that when he falls to them, that's the guy they go with. And I think that that's something we definitely need to just see and talk about. He's a special player, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and I mean we love him as a prospect, and we talked about how recently there was guys that went high.
mhm.
Most recently, Kyle Pitts, how projected highest prospect ever. You know, this guy had the production, and it's not very often where you are referred to as the best player in football, and you're not a quarterback,
Right.
and then you're just gonna slide down the draft boards. No injury issues, no character issues, no playing time issues, none of that.
Yep.
There's no issues. Cleanest prospect to me in the draft is between Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers. And Brock Bowers, arguably, because of he did it from a true freshman, was instantly
Right.
All American
Absolutely.
caliber player on a championship team. That kind of gives the edge a little bit in the in
Hmm.
the in the prospect department. It's just kind of it's the nature of the beast when it's the position of need, and sometimes when you have a draft class that, like we said, quarterback, tackle, wide receiver is heavy. Those are three of the most important positions when you're developing a roster. Sometimes the other positions kind of fall a little bit,
Yeah.
and he's going to be a victim of that. But hopefully that puts him in a better situation too, because if he hypothetically fell to the Bengals, I'd be licking my chops every day watching him play, because that would be the perfect situation for him. If
That'd
he
be
goes
amazing.
to the Colts, and who knows what they do with Michael Pittman Jr. in this offseason since he's a free agent, but rookie quarterback, and he was already making plays with Kyle Granson and Mo Alley Cox. Like, just imagine what you give him Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
So obviously we want to talk right now about the 20 to 32 range, but that was something that we wanted to bring back up, is just how much we love him, and we're going to be talking about him all off season.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of one of those victims that we have him dropping all the way to 15.
Well, I think, fantasy football,
Mm-hmm.
like we could have a real conversation if he goes to certain teams of him being a top 6, 7 guy. I mean, Sam Laporta did it last year, and he wasn't a 2-time Mackey Award winner.
Yep.
The 2-time best tight end in college football. So I think that's something we just need to think about when we're, um, sometimes the positional needs and value. Someone will pick best player available, and Brock Bowers will be the best player available for, I don't know, 10 picks in a row.
4, yeah. After 4, he's the best one.
He's the best player available. So, but yeah, so we're going to talk about next one of our other things that were important to us is kind of the back end of the draft and who could move in and trade for the final quarterback in the top 6 in Bo Nix. There's, like we said earlier, we had a lot of teams that already addressed quarterback, draft, trades, Russ, and Justin Fields, Kirk Cousins. But there are multiple teams that are needy of a quarterback. And I think, finding a way to get back into the back end of the first round could be a way to find their quarterback that they need. And he's an older quarterback, so he's ready to play now.
Right. But at the same time, we could always see somebody sliding. Last year, I thought Will Levis, somebody was going to for sure take him early. Mm-hmm. I think I had him projected to go in the top 6 to Indy. And he just kept going and going and going and going. And then one of the teams that needed a quarterback but just didn't address in the first round is the one that just fell in their laps. Right. And Tennessee took him. And, he had some bright spots, but that's just kind of a situation I see with Bo Nix or whoever is the 6th quarterback, because I think 5 for certain will be selected in the first round, especially 1, 2, 3, and then probably the next 2 in the teens. Mm-hmm. But then the 6th one could just kind of get the short end of the stick and not find himself in a great situation. You look in the early parts of the second round, and it's littered with the teams that either just solved the issue or don't need to solve the issue. Mm-hmm. So it's either, to me, there's somebody that's going to reach on him, and I'm looking at Seattle or the Rams as teams that I could see making that kind of move. Right. Or our friend Will Levitt, Will would love it because he's a Seahawk and an Oregon fan. Yeah. So, but if that doesn't happen, it's like who do we see as teams that could logically trade up into the first round to get that 5th-year option, which is all the more important the way that the salary cap is set up nowadays.
Yeah, and I think also there's teams, and I don't think that I don't think that they can project that he'll be there or that you can move back and find a quarterback. But the Saints have the worst cap space in football. Mm-hmm. Their quarterback situation isn't great, and if they move back from 14, they might be able to find a way to get to a Bo Nix or Michael Penix, whoever's sitting there later on in the draft. In the Raiders, we need a quarterback. I love Aiden, but at the same time, I need way more production, and I don't want to get beat 3-0. Mm-hmm. So
that's a rough one.
So possibly finding a way to get back into the first round by the Raiders. The Rams have an aging Matthew Stafford. I don't think they need to do that in the first. But, things like that.
And by the time he takes over, essentially all their cap woes that they kind of pushed the can down the road when they got their Super Bowl, that'll kind of all be essentially gone by the time he would take over, which I would, forecast being the year after this one.
Yeah.
Obviously, since he's going to be 24, that's not an ideal situation.
Right.
Because you want a 24-year-old quarterback to be starting. But we've seen Jordan Love as a 25-year-old rookie in his first season as a full-time starter and just light up the board because of the situation he was in and what he was able to do.
Players around him and things. Exactly. Yeah. And then so that's off that's the last quarterback we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. There's no more going to hop into the first round.
Sorry, Spencer Rattler.
Yeah. But we do want to talk about some late fantasy implications. Mm-hmm. At 28 to the Buffalo Bills, we had Brian Thomas Jr. Technically would be stepping in if everything that we think will happens, mm-hmm. with Gabe Davis and Stephon being out of town as the number 1 receiver there. So that would possibly make him a true fantasy asset, especially to people that just look at how situations are. Josh Allen's throwing him the ball. He's the only guy that can catch it. Let's put him on our team. So I think that's important. And he's a big receiver. He had the most touchdowns in college football last year, 17, in 12 and 13 games, I believe. 12 games. 12 games. He did not play the bowl game. So that's a crazy number. So we know he has big playability. And then you move over to Kansas City. Kansas City has had drop issues, riddled with issues at wide receiver. Rashee Rice becomes the number one receiver. And I'll be honest, Rashee Rice played great. But fantastic. At the same time, Rashee Rice he's still not a number one. He's still not projected athletically like some of these other guys. Rashee Rice in this class would be lower teens, ability-wise, and you're going to get the 5th overall player in this class, wide receiver-wise. So I think that is something you will be improving your team even more than when Rashee came in and how people view him. Well, Troy Franklin is a guy, he's 5th on our board, played with Bo Nix, did some, great things there and had some other good teammates, of course, but I think that's important, of course. So
yeah, and I think we touched on this earlier today. Kansas City doesn't need that big possession receiver. Mm-hmm. I think we have some other guys that would probably be more ideal fits. We kind of put Troy Franklin in by default, but I think an Xavier Worthy is the style of receiver that they want. Like they wanted McCole Hardman and Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore to pan out so much. That style of just gadget guy that can be end around, just quick out the slot, dink and dunk kind of receivers. They want that style of receiver. That's why McCole Hardman is getting end arounds in the AFC Championship game, the divisional round.
Yeah.
So those things are happening because that's what they want, and Kansas City needs a little bit more of the over the top that they're missing out. Even though that they've won 2 Super Bowls since getting rid of Tyreek Hill, they still haven't had the over the top production. And they did sign MVS 2 off seasons ago to fill that role and just be get every couple games get a deep ball. But he took a big step back as the one lone veteran on that. This was the perfect situation for him to just be the guy to at least make the plays at the end, and he more often than not did not pan out. Mm-hmm. He did have some great plays in the playoffs, but his cap number is so high that he's probably going to be one of the easiest clickbait cuts that you can project. And so, I
think if you have to compare your number 2 receiver, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but Justin Watson is in that conversation as your number 2. Mm-hmm. I think that tells you a lot about what you're lacking as a receiving core. And you do want that over the top guy. And Troy Franklin and Tez Walker and Xavier Worthy, these types of guys are going to run insane numbers at the combine. They're going to be crazy and they're going to push them up boards. And I think that, we already kind of got ahead of that in this situation because I think Troy Franklin being 6'3", but also has that speed can be somebody that, a team like Kansas City could really value. But doesn't mean they're going to want him. Doesn't mean they're going to decide that. But I think we're on the same page that he fits that mold.
Mm-hmm. Really well. And I mean, we've seen before where they just kind of want that certain mold of guy. And I mean, the infamous one is drafting CEH over Jonathan Taylor. There was zero reason, numbers, size, like what have you. What did you see? Doesn't matter. They won a Super Bowl with him.
Yeah.
And they moved off, and they have a 7th round running back that's going to be fine. They want the guy that fits their offense the best, and so that's why we might see a reach if it is like a Xavier Worthy, who I think that would be probably 20 picks too high based on the amount of depth at the position, but that's kind of the gadget guy that could benefit both parties.
But Xavier Worthy also in other drafts could be a early 2nd round guy. Mm-hmm. And so I think, that's another thing is like, we're obviously comparing these guys to each other, but if you compare them holistically to every draft we've had, he could fit that area of the draft. Um,
I'm
so
just not. I've watched a lot of Texas games. I'm a Longhorn fan. Um, Speed receivers that are body catchers are always concerning.
yeah,
A lot of times, possession receivers like a Quinn Johnston
mm-hmm.
can get away with body catching. Obviously, he's kind of been exposed with his atrocious rookie season. But speed receivers, like you're going to be place that ball on a dime,
yeah,
or running downfield, you're going to have to possess it. And
mm-hmm.
way too often, I think he's relied on easy catches coming into his chest. And I don't think that would benefit him in the long run, especially playing with somebody like Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also think these guys play against when you're in college. You're not playing against these. Not necessarily not amazing. I mean, compared to us, they're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you get a guy that runs this at the speed that Xavier does. Some corners just can't keep up, and he makes big plays because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, he actually has one of the lowest, which I was very surprised by, depth of target, which is something that you'd expect a guy that is a take the top off of the defense type of player
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be, in the low teens, 11. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I know that a guy like Jermaine Burton, who had 20.6 was his depth of target. That's insane, right? Average ADOT that's deep. And half of that is Xavier Worthy. And we'd say Xavier Worthy's more explosive. So that's my problem with it. But yeah, so late round fantasy implications. Anybody that goes to Kansas City is going to be a good fantasy option, because he's probably a better player in our eyes and recruiting and prospect wise than Rashee Rice, who is their number one. But yeah, so we're going to move on to the offensive tackle class or offensive line class, and just talk about the holistic of it. There's 8 guys that got picked in this draft. And we're going to just kind of go quick gloss over all of them and just talk about where they are and why we think they're there. So starting with, of course, Amarius Mims out of Georgia. He's going to Cincinnati Bengals, and he's going there because he is a true right tackle, and Jonah Williams is most likely not going to be there, and he has not played up to standard of what you would expect a first round pick to do, or first top 10 pick to do. So that's why he's there. Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma is the most projected prospect I've ever seen. He has all the tools, insane athleticism. He was an honorable mention Big 12 player. And I think that kind of, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying speaks to where he is as a prospect and how good he was in the eyes of other coaches in that league compared to other players. Guy like Dominic Pooney, who went to Kansas, who played tackle, is most likely not going to be a tackle. He'll probably be a guard. And he was not necessarily as good as that guy. So I think that that's a big thing. Just kind of thinking about him. He's probably the best athlete at the tackle class in the tackle
he's
class.
just he's probably the biggest question mark of the top guys in terms of production.
Absolutely.
So,
Troy Fontenot, he went to Washington. He had the most pass rush snaps this year, or pass play snaps this year, of any player, because he went 15 games. He's most likely going to move to interior line, and if you look at him, he looks like an interior lineman to me. He's not as big. Like he moves differently than most tackles would, and he's not as tall. He's not as big. Size matters. Arm length matters. And we've seen players, and we had this conversation last year, that can do it, can play tackle. The Rashawn Slater, who had shorter arms, wasn't as big, but is great. Right. But then we also saw from the same mold, Peter Skoronski, who is now playing guard. And so he's one of the guys we expect to move inside. Has similar build to those two guys, but I think that Rashawn Slater was such a good prospect that it outweighed, basically. Graham Barton is going to be a Dallas Cowboy in our draft, and actually a lot of people believe that he will probably go there. I think that's one of the most pressing needs and one of the guys that fits the mold that Dallas likes. he is going to have the most positional flexibility out of any player in this class. Mel Kiper has him as the number one center. He played every snap for Duke at tackle, left tackle, and he is the number one center in the class.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that tells you just a little bit about who he is. And then this next pick, we actually had some true conversation about. J.C. Latham is not on this list. He did not make the cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is going to be surprising to a lot of people. But Jordan Morgan played multiple snaps at both left tackle and right tackle. And San Francisco, like we talked about, has an aging out left tackle in Trent Williams, who's the best tackle in football for the most part. And then at right tackle, they need to improve. So Jordan Morgan can do both. And he's the perfect swing man to come in and either wait for a contract to end and be the backup on both sides, or be the better player at right tackle and start, and then move to left tackle later on if he has to.
Right. And we're seeing more and more nowadays where guys aren't just staying in one spot their whole career.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're moving around a little bit. And like Tyler Smith, we're talking about with the Cowboys, was a tackle coming out. He would be the future with Tyron.
Yeah.
Moves on, and he's been a Pro Bowl guard, and he's panned out.
Yeah.
And when Dallas is improving their line, you don't have to just be like, oh, yeah, they need a tackle, because in their eyes, they could be like, no, we have our tackle. He's just playing guard right now.
Right.
And so with Jordan Morgan, like you said, positional flexibility, even if they moved him inside or played at right tackle, which is probably their most pressing need on their offensive line, and then in 2 seasons or 1 season, however long Trent Williams wants to go, he could be the one to move over to left tackle if he does continue to pan out.
Right.
And they've done a very good job of drafting offensive linemen over the last decade or so. And he could very well be that guy. Obviously, J.C. Latham is a guy that a lot of people actually have going in the teens.
Yeah.
And we don't have him. Tell me a little bit about why he didn't make the cut, and is there a possibility that he might get moved back up if Combine comes around?
Yeah, I think biggest thing is people moving up too. So Jordan Morgan was probably the only guy that I was comfortable saying J.C. Latham was above. And I'm not talking about interior wise. So
just pure offensive
just
tackles.
Offensive tackles, because I think J.C. Latham could play guard, but I don't think you're going to draft him to play guard. He's 6'6", 360 pounds, big guy, and he moves people really well, but consistency issues to me. And I think the weight is actually bad for him. Like, I think he has bad weight. I think he needs to maybe 340 would be better. 330 would be better. And because he feels and looks like a guard to me, and I think a team will draft him to play tackle. The other guys on this list, because you don't project him to play guard, you don't think he will play interior offensive line. I can't put him over Graham Barton or Fatan, because both of those guys are going to play interior offensive line, and we know that, and that's okay because they're going to be really good at it, right? Fatanu is going to be one of the best pulling guards because he can move like that. Like, he can just do those things. And I have a hard time seeing that same thing with Latham. And so I think and the other thing is Tyler Guyton is being projected to be amazing. And I think that he could. I think he'll need a year. And that's why sometimes I have a hard time and he's a right tackle, and going to Pittsburgh, he's probably going to have to move to left tackle. And we had this conversation about possibly going corner there instead, because there's so many good corners. But, this is like how, this is how the conversation goes. Like, J.C. Latham didn't make the cut because, well, San Francisco probably needs a guy that can do both, truly. And a guy that's, older and consistent and doesn't make mistakes and is, going to be one of the better players at that, constant level. While inconsistency hurts J.C. Latham to me. And some people are noticing that. I mean, he's ranked, 6th on our board. And that's behind Mims, Guyton, and he sits above Jordan Morgan, but Jordan Morgan was our pick. And I just think that's because of fit, too. So for our last thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the cornerbacks and talk about this cornerback class. Lots of cornerbacks going in this draft, 6 of them, which is awesome. And there's a few that are out of order compared to our draft or compared to our prospects. But this is what we expect to happen and not so much what we would do. So first you got to look at Terrion Arnold. Terrion Arnold is not our number one corner.
Mm-hmm.
Terrion Arnold is third on our list, which is it's a new trend. It's a trend nowadays, or now that Terrion Arnold is moving up and jumping up draft boards. I can understand it because of the athleticism and the things he can do on the football field. But I think that he was targeted a lot this year, and teams were willing to target him over Kool-Aid, and that tells me a lot about what they thought of him. And he was an All-American. Mm-hmm. It's fine, but he had 5 interceptions, and 3 of them were tip passes, not true interceptions. And I know that that's that happens to everybody, but true interceptions, he had 2 true interceptions. So I think that that's something. Nate Wiggins is our number one corner. Long, athletic, rangy guy. Needs to put a little weight on, but he is going to be 21 on the dot. That month, the season starts, he will be turning 21 years old.
One of the youngest in the draft.
Yeah, so I think that that gives you a lot of excitement. Quinion Mitchell is the funnest guy ever, first off. He had 4 interceptions versus Northern Illinois, and that is just insane.
You don't see that nowadays.
Yeah, that was last year. That wasn't this year. Mm-hmm. This year they wouldn't throw at him because they decided that was a good idea.
Right.
I agree. He had possibly the perfect metrics by PFF, and the thing we needed him to prove was the fact that he was a good press cover corner. And guess what? He lost 1 rep at the Senior Bowl. He had 2 interceptions at the Senior Bowl. He lost 1 rep to Roman Wilson. It was an out route for 4 yards.
Yep.
Good job. That's a win in my book, you know, so I think that that's pretty cool. He's a pretty cool player. I think one of my favorite steals of the draft is this next guy, Cooper DeJean. He's our number 2 corner, but the reason he's there is because he's a Swiss Army knife. He's
not a true corner. You're just going to place on the outside and be like, lock down one side of the field.
You're not going to say, hey, go cover that guy. And when that guy moves, wherever he goes, you got him, right? And you're going to just expect that guy to not catch the ball. This is more of the guy where you're like, this week we need him to do this. This week we need him to do this. We need to do this. And so going to Green Bay, I think it's the perfect fit because normally with him, I think, you're going to have Jair, number 1 outside corner. You're not going to have to worry about the number 1 player most of the time. But say you go play Dallas and CeeDee Lamb runs in the slot always, right? Mm-hmm. Cooper DeJean can go in the slot. And he's not going to miss a step because he's in the slot. He's a good run defender. He can play safety. You can use him as any type of thing. He's probably a 2nd-round grade on every position in the secondary. And that's something I just think is hard to find.
Incredible.
Next up is Arizona's going to get, for their 2nd pick, they're going to get Kool-Aid McKinstry, who is not the freak athlete, but he is one of the smoothest, most comfortable, technical corners in this class. He's not a freak athlete, and that's why he's not going higher. Mm-hmm. Because Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, Quinion Mitchell, they're all freaks.
Yeah, and next week's combines is probably going to be a disservice to him.
Yes.
But it'll probably be the best thing for whoever.
Well, Terrion Arnold's already up there, but I think he's probably going to test the best out of everybody. And then Detroit, we got Ennis Rankstraw Jr. Out of Missouri. He is a guy that he played across from Chris Abrams Drain. Mm-hmm. And Chris Abrams Drain was a All-American on the same team. And Rakestraw was a 2nd-team SEC player. They're so different. Drain is really good at zone coverage and found ways to make interceptions and make turnovers. Rakestraw is the guy you ask, hey, he's long, athletic, cover this guy, don't let him catch the ball. You're going to do good, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason I think he fits really well at the Lions is he loves making tackles in the run game. He is a guy that triggers fast and is hungry. He's not very big, which is just so funny to watch because he's going out there and he's just laying the boom and he's 185 pounds. It's fun to watch.
Right.
So I think that's a good fit for them. So,
Yeah. I mean, all these teams, we see a run on corners. Obviously, it starts at 13, but we've seen Terran Arnold go as high as 8
Hmm.
to Atlanta. It's just kind of, I feel like 1 through 6 is so close. Like, I don't think that there's we see like the first 3 tackles, there's a drop off.
Yeah.
First 3 receivers, there's a drop off. I don't really see that with these corners. I
Yeah.
think all of them are very good and all of them can contribute
Hmm.
right away. But I don't see one that's just going to be head over heels above everybody and everybody knows it. Like,
Right.
there could be 5 different corners on all the NFL teams number one on their board.
Right.
That just they're very different styles, and that's just kind of where you just kind of pick and choose what you need.
Yeah, I think also like our rankings are not what other people are ranking them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I stand pat to say like there's a conversation for all these guys to be number one to me. I think that actually starts like, so the Arnold, Wiggins, Mitchell, and DeJean all have a conversation to be number one. I don't believe that McKinstry has a conversation anymore based on just what, we've done our research and seen. I don't think Kool-Aid does, but at the same time, he's going to be a great player for wherever he goes. And that's something that
Mm-hmm.
kind of needs to be said is like, yes, he's not in the first tier, but that doesn't change the fact that as a number 2 corner, you are getting a great player. If you have another corner on the other side and you want a number 2 and you get Kool-Aid in the back half of the first round, you're very happy.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I mean, we had a mock draft a couple of years ago when Trayvon Diggs came out,
mhm,
and I remember you mocking him at 17 to Dallas,
I did.
and he fell all the way to 51 to Dallas, and it's kind of like, why'd that happen? He's panned out, but there's so many good corners in that class. Jalen Johnson was my favorite corner in that class, and he has been excellent. He's probably the number one free agent.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get franchise tagged, so
He's good at
you
zoning.
could have made a case for a lot of guys, and I see a similarity in this class where there could be a guy that just falls
Mm-hmm.
and is like the 7th in his class, but he could instantly just pop off the charts
Right.
immediately from day one. So
Yeah. So that's the end of our first ever Game Time Discussions mock draft. It's been fun. I love this time.
Mhm.
It's the best time of the year.
It's a good 8 time.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really appreciate y'all coming. Please go into our description and follow our socials and get in our Discord chat and have a discussion with us. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. We're Game Time Discussions for a reason. And just get into the community and be a part of it, because we're hoping to build this and have people watch this channel and see, we're willing to be wrong, but we do good. We've had I had 9 right in the draft 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had multiple right in multiple drafts. So this isn't something that we just do for fun. Like this is part of our passion. This is what we do. And I'm not going to say we're good at it, but I know that we've done okay.
Right.
So
yeah, and it's all fun and games, but there's also a lot of moving parts. So we wanted to get this out right before the combine starting because we don't know what's going to influence that,
Mhm.
and then there's free agency. Obviously, like we said, position needs just completely flip flop, and then blockbuster trades. Who knows? It's our first stint. Our second one will come out after probably free agency.
Mhm.
And we'll assess the combine in addition to those needs and give our immediate thoughts to that. But in the meantime, tell us what you think. What was your favorite picks? Like, what's the matchup that you think is made in heaven for said player? What is somebody that who's somebody that we're too low on? Who can you see just go into the combine and killing it? Let us know. We'd like to talk about it, and we'll just kind of see where we go from here.
Yeah, and if your team, we talked about a bunch of teams. Like if you disagree with what we said about your team, I mean, you're the fan. You watch them more than we do, probably.
Mm-hmm.
As much as like we watch football, like we don't watch every 32 team at range. Like I know Cam watches Dallas, like at the back. He knows Dallas like the back of his hand, so he has a feeling of who he wants there and what he wants to do with them. So, help us out. Even I mean, we're open for suggestions. if you have good reasoning and good logical knowledge on the situation, and we'll listen. So we really appreciate y'all watching. Please go comment, go subscribe, go follow all the other things, because we want to build this community so that we can have these conversations and have discussions about these things that we love. So
yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. Like I said, click the links below. Get with us, interact. Let's build this community the way we should, and let's have some fun throughout this whole off season and summer.
Yeah, thank you all.
Take care, guys.
Bye.